Dear Chris and dear Center for Mindfulness, you have brought mindfulness into society, into healthcare, education, the military, prisons, leadership training, elite sport, and into the workplace. A few years ago, John Kabat-Zinn went to Downing Street 10 and gave a talk on mindfulness, and I believe he was invited by you. Now the UK government has made the most ambitious plan called the Mindful Nation report for creating better mental health for all Brits in the future. Besides access to mindfulness treatment, the Mindful Nation UK report concludes that we need to take prevention strategies seriously if we are to reduce the burden of mental ill health and encourage the flourishing and well-being of a healthy nation. And mindfulness is one of the most promising prevention strategies. Chris, my hope is that we can do the same in Denmark, creating better mental health results in the future by educating mindfulness teachers and make mindfulness accessible for prevention, treatment, and rehabilitation. For 10 years, or more than 10 years, I've been part of this worldwide mindfulness and research community that was started by the Center for Mindfulness at the University of Massachusetts Medical School, a community based on love, commitment, ethics, and wisdom. The Center for Mindfulness have helped me trusting in my heart and let my heart be part of my work in science and medicine, and not to make any separation between love, work, medicine, and practice. I'm deeply grateful. Before we commence on your talk now that we've all been waiting for, I have 2 questions for you. How do you think we best implement mindfulness into Danish society according to these core values of love, community, commitment, ethics, and wisdom? And how precisely did you get John Kabat-Zinn into Downing Street 10? Thank you.
Right. So, my name is Chris Ruane. I'm the Member of Parliament for the Vale of Clwyd constituency in North Wales in the UK. And before, I was a Member of Parliament for 18 years. But prior to that, I was a teacher in a primary school for 15 years. It was the same primary school I went to when I was 3. I was a Billy Backwater. So in 1987, the school was being inspected by Her Majesty's Inspectorate, and the staff got the jitters. So the head teacher brought in the school nurse, and she taught meditation, not mindfulness, meditation to the whole school. So that's the head, the staff, the janitor, the cooks, and I participated, and it was tension and release throughout the body. It was a body scan, not so much on the breath or the philosophy of mindfulness, and it worked for me. So I then started using it with the 10-year-old children in my class, and in those days, back in the 1980s, there were 39 children in my class. I had to herd them round and shepherd them. And I used meditation with some visualization. I was aware of Ignatius Loyola, his visualizations, and I used the breath and meditation with some visualizations to help me in the classroom. So the children would come in from playtime, and it would be wet and windy, and they would all be up in the air. I would sit them down, and just 2 minutes of meditation would allow them to focus and gain their attention. And I also used it in creative writing. I used it it was a Roman Catholic school. I used it and I used to take the assemblies. So there wouldn't be 39 children, there would be 300 children. And I would settle them down with meditation. I would then tell a story from the Bible, and I would ask them to put themselves there, to feel their feet on the hot sands of Lake Galilee, to hear the flapping of the sails, to feel the wind on their face. And by actually putting those children in the story themselves, the responses that came from them were tremendous. So I started using it in the art appreciation. I would use it in gym to give them better body control. I would use it after football to relax them. And the day finished at 3 o'clock. Football was from 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock. I would relax them. They would be walking out of school like this. And the parents would be saying, "What have you done to my child? He's all calm and relaxed." And in 2012, June 2012, and we planned for 6 months, and then in January 2013, we set up the first mindfulness practice in the United Kingdom Parliament. And there were 22 MPs, and I wanted to do it on a cross-party basis. I'm a Labour MP. I didn't want it to be done as a Labour initiative on a cross-party basis. And we followed Mark Williams's book, Peace in a Frantic World, which obviously it's mindfulness, it's the importance of the breath and the body, and mindfulness of thought, mindful movement. We followed over an 8-week course. We followed his book. With these lessons in Parliament, we learned to sit in silence. Most of the early lessons were taught and guided meditations. Now we sit on a Tuesday afternoon at 5:30 till 6 o'clock, mostly in silence. And as Blaise Pascal said, all human evil comes from a single cause, man's inability to sit still in a room. And in this 24/7 society, it is very, very difficult to sit still and to be at ease with ourselves. Some even claim that it's changed their relationship with other MPs in Parliament. It's transformational with their relationships. When you meditate with a person, it's hard to be nasty to them afterwards. When people are prepared to show their vulnerability, are prepared to fall in front of you, it's difficult to have a go at them. In the well-being curve, the people below the curve definitely need it. Whatever that is in different countries, 20, 30%, 15% in some. But there's a whole bell curve here of people who are quite well and some that are even flourishing. And I think the job of mindfulness, is to shift that whole bell curve along. So the biggest beneficiaries are the people below the bell curve, but everybody benefits. I think mindfulness can help achieve a flourishing society. So we had the lessons in Parliament, and they were a success. Over the past 4.5, 5 years, we've had 150 members of Parliament who've had training. Members of Parliament and members of the House of Lords. Chris Cullen is a very generous man. He comes down from Oxford on a Tuesday. At 1 o'clock, he teaches MP staff. And there's 250 of those that have benefited from Chris's lectures and Chris's practice, mindfulness practice. And what's important is that those 250, the biggest pool of future MPs is from researchers. So David Cameron, Ed Miliband, David Miliband, leaders of our political parties, all started off as researchers. So we have sown the seeds of mindfulness in government and in Parliament. There's also, on a separate but parallel initiative, 3,000 senior civil servants have been introduced to mindfulness by one woman, Marion Furr, a senior civil servant in the Department of Health. But the Department of Health employs 1.3 million people in the United Kingdom, and the central department has 2,000 civil servants. And she personally introduced mindfulness to 1,000 of those senior civil servants, hoping that it would cascade through the whole Department of Health for those 1.3 million people who work there, but also in terms of policy and research. Our Mindful Nation report, and this is the report. There's a physical copy of the book here. And this book is based on 8 evidence gathering sessions, and it covers criminal justice, education, the workplace, and the health service. And we took evidence in the oak-panelled rooms of Parliament from 80 different witnesses, most of them from the UK, 1 or 2, like Charles Halpern from Berkeley, from outside of the United Kingdom, Chris Tamjidi from Germany. We took evidence from 80 people in 8 evidence sessions. We had, this is Tim Lawton, the chap at the microphone, a Conservative. These were chaired by a Conservative, a Liberal, a Labour MP. And we had a launch of the Mindful Nation document, our research, and I have to give praise to Chris Cullen, and the woman on the left there is Madeleine Bunting, because Chris Cullen and Madeleine Bunting set up the Mindfulness Initiative, which supports MPs in Parliament. They set that up about 3 years ago, both of them inspirational mindfulness leaders. With the support of 30 academics, scientists, teachers, prison officers, police officers who practice mindfulness, we were able to bring this document about. 8 evidence sessions, 80 people giving evidence, and in the back there are 250 references. And most of these are scientific references. And if you go in online, you can ping into the reference and it gives you a full account of the science behind it. But it's not just filled with facts and figures and statistics, it's filled with the personal testimony of different people. This was a lad, a prisoner, who was abused by his own father at the age of 5 and traumatised and responded with violence until he discovered mindfulness in prisons. We've got teachers and pupils in here. And it's those personal testimonies that bring this document alive. And it's been recognised, and people have recognised it as a good, well-researched document around the world. And in this report, we asked for achievable things from the government, small requests. And I'm pleased to say I'm a Labour politician. And these have been delivered by a Conservative government. And again, it shows that cross-party support. We asked for an extra 300 MBCT teachers to be trained in the National Health Service, and we ended up with 400 teachers who were going to be trained over 1 year. And there was a pushback. They said they don't need 2 weeks on a retreat. And Willem Kijken said they absolutely do need 2 weeks on a retreat. He argued for the best training for MBC teachers, and he got that. We asked for the government to set up a criminal justice committee to review mindfulness in the criminal justice in the prisons, in the probationary service. They agreed. We thought that mindfulness was being taught in 6 prisons. When this committee got together, they found out it was 32 prisons in the United Kingdom. That's probably because they wanted to keep it below the radar in case the right-wing press got hold of it and said that these prisoners are getting it too cushy. But if you think, what do you do with a prisoner? Do you pump him up full of antidepressants and then send him out again? Or do you teach him the way to regulate his emotions, to regulate his or her anger? And there's been no backlash against this. And that committee is doing a great job. We've seen success in the private sector, and we've kept up the pressure. Pressure's the wrong word. We've kept up it is pressure on government to deliver on this. We've also been working with a follow-up publication, building the case for mindfulness in the workplace, and we've been working with some of the top companies in the UK. Jaguar Land Rover have taught mindfulness or introduced mindfulness to 2,500 of their 45,000 staff in the United Kingdom. Ernst & Young let us launch the document from their big tall sky tower in Canary Wharf. So we're cooperating with the private sector. And I mentioned the Myriad project before. So these are all ways that we've come together as politicians to take mindfulness forward in government, in Parliament, and in society. And what's been done in the United Kingdom can be done elsewhere. I've mentioned the stuff that we've done in the United Kingdom Parliament, but I don't want, it's not the British Empire, it's not rule Britannia. There is best practice around the world. We went the first Parliament to adopt, in the West, to adopt mindfulness. That was the Swedish Parliament, just over the bridge. And again, inspirational people. A female Swedish MP, again on the right, Anne-Marie Broden, who established mindfulness in the Swedish Parliament in 2012, with a great advocate, and behind every politician that introduces it, there are always great advocates pulling the strings. And it's Chris Cullen and Mark Williams with me, not pulling my strings, but advising me and helping me and keeping me on the straight and narrow and slowing me down. And in Sweden, it was Gunnar Mechanik. And if you do want to take mindfulness forward in Denmark, perhaps he would be the logical person to help you. But the Swedish Parliament established mindfulness in 2012. Tim Ryan, Congressman Tim Ryan, he established mindfulness on Capitol Hill in 2012. I think in June 2012.
And this is a comment and a question, because you touched upon the bell curve. You said something like that this may not work for everybody, but if it works for 20 or 30 or 50%, then you may have the chance to switch the normal distribution of mental health and mental health problems toward more health, less problems. And I just want to emphasize that this is really a very, very strong argument, because according to Rose's strategy for prevention, that is how you really create more health. It's not by just focuses on the ones who has already problems, but if you can gain more health for the many around the mean, then you really prevent problems also in the severe end. So that's my comment. Thank you very much for mentioning the bell curve. It's a strong argument. Now my question is this: how on earth do you explain that for politicians? Because it's a bit, you have to be familiar with the idea of a normal distribution and of mental health problems being on a continuum. It's not black and white. It's on a continuum. It's dimensional. So how do you explain that argument when you meet politicians?
And I think there are issues for politicians. This is where we may lose the consensualness of mindfulness, because you can feel the immediate effect of mindfulness. You can put it forward in the health service, in the education service, and most people wouldn't argue about that. In the prison service, some might argue about that. Being nice to prisoners is awful, but the general outcome is that they're going to be better when they leave. But I think with mindfulness and the opening of the heart and the mind, bigger questions need to be asked. What is it in the United Kingdom society that is turning 32.3% of young people between 15 and 25 to have one or more psychiatric condition? We can give them drugs to cope with it, we can give them mindfulness to cope with it, but those pressures will still be there. I think that's 59, I think that's about it. So once again, thank you. Thank you very much. Shall we say in Wales, diolch yn fawr iawn.